because we're running out of time, but also because when it comes to services, so much has already been said by people more qualified than me. So what I'm instead going to focus on is what it looks like from the outside, from a neighbouring country and someone who works for the Australian government in the economic area, in the trade area, that is looking to achieve more market access in services in Indonesia. So if you like, it's a little bit of the alternative view or the counterpart view to what you heard this morning from Mr. Lembong, except obviously not quite as senior. So I might start off by saying, first of all, that the services trade two ways between our countries is 3.8 billion, which is actually incredibly low when you think of the fact that we're neighbours, we're both the two G20 economies of this region. Australia has the third highest managed funds in the world. We have a high-tech economy, an ageing population. Indonesia has a young population, it has a big population, and it has a magnificent strategic location for goods and services. So 3.8 billion between us is very low. Now there are a number of reasons for that. I won't go into an analytical piece about that. One of the most obvious reasons is that both of us have been enjoying the commodities boom to China in particular over the last couple of decades. And we've both woken up at the same time from the party. The music has stopped, the nightclub has closed down, and now we've taken stock of where we should be. And for Australia, it's very much an emphasis now on our creative economy, on our services, in showing that we are not just a commodity exporter. And what that translates to in terms of policy and trade policy is that we therefore want to find partners particularly in Asia, which is the world's most booming market, particularly in the services sector. And from an Australian perspective, Asia isn't Asia without Indonesia. So from an Indonesian perspective, we've heard already different perspectives from ministers and others about life after the commodities boom. But what we hear from the Indonesian president is pretty clear. He's always saying the word bersaing, we must compete, we must lift our game. And it's important what he does say, and we've taken very careful of note of this, is that as the conversation in Indonesia gets more and more expansive about trade and competition and joining up in international trade agreements, the message that comes through loud and clear from the Indonesian side is that Indonesia shouldn't just be a market, it shouldn't just be a consumer. Indonesia wants to produce goods and develop services and be part of that. And we hear that, we understand that, that makes sense. So we're both countries coming out of the commodities boom, and in that state of affairs, we've decided to reopen the IASEPA after a number of years of being moribund. You can see how it makes sense, you can see how that opportunity came for us. So what is IASEPA? Well, it's mainly, our plan is, at least from the Australian side, and I think it matches what we heard this morning from Mr. Lembong, it's particularly to look at sectors where there are opportunities, including services sectors, obviously, and build reform around those sectors so that we have mutual wins, so that we can demonstrate, yes, we've succeeded here. So what does some of that good policy and good regulatory change look like? I'm going to give you one example of one very smart decision by the Indonesian government taken in March, and look at why it was so to butt. So in March, the Indonesian government made a fairly anodyne decision in that it added Australia to the list of countries that can enter Indonesia visa-free for short-stay tourism visas. So what? More than 100 other countries already get that. But think about this. Australia is your biggest tourism customer. In 2014, we had nearly 1 million people come to Indonesia. Obviously, we're your neighbour, we're well off. Indonesia's beautiful. We're going to keep coming. Not only were you your biggest customer in terms of numbers, but also in terms of money spent. So that nearly 1 million tourists in 2014 spent 18 trillion rupiah. That's what they put into your economy. That's 18 trillion out of the 268 trillion rupiah that Australians spend as tourists overseas. So Indonesia's got a fair share. We did a bit of analysis of what it does for tourist numbers when Indonesia gives them visa-free access. And it shows that the number of tourists jumps by about 19%, nearly 20%. So if you read that back into those figures, the decision to give Australia visa-free access means that there will be 221,000 more Australians coming to Indonesia, which means that you, by making that decision, have just added about 3.4 trillion rupiah to your GDP. So it's a smart decision. And it's the sort of thing we want to develop in ISEPA. Smart decisions around particular sectors where we can and should do more. There's another decision that is out there in front of us. One of the great things about ISEPA is that the role of the business community is very prominent in giving advice. So a Australia-Indonesia Business Partnership Group, the IPBG, was set up. Some of its members are on the board there, so Kadin, Apindo, the IABC and their Australian counterparts. And when the ISEPA was last being discussed and negotiated, one of the ideas from this business grouping, it's not a government idea, it's a business idea, was for a skilled visa, whereby you get 6 months. If you're invited by a business in one of the other countries, you can get a visa and come to the other country for 6 months. Now the numbers might be limited, but think of what that might do for business for both countries. Think of the technology exchange, the skills exchange, and most importantly, the greater familiarity it would encourage in both countries for doing business in the other country. Think of where that might work in particular sectors that you've heard about today, such as education, such as health, such as financial services, such as ICT. There's real opportunities for us to take steps like this and other steps in ISEPA which work around particular sectors, undertake regulatory reform so that businesses in those sectors can thrive. Now, I'm not going to go on for very much longer. I'm not going to go longer into more policy examples or things that might be negotiated, A, because of time, and B, because it's bad form to, it's better to negotiate in private, as you all know. But I just want to say a couple of things. Australia and Indonesia can be very successful at doing things together. Today is a bit of an example. UI and ANU working together is a bit of an example. Education, I'd have to say also our economic governance cooperation between Australia and Indonesia is an outstanding success. Similarly, infrastructure, we do some great work together in infrastructure. We can actually do things together. So I share Mr. Lembong's optimism that we can do things in ISEPA, we can get something that works, and above all, and I'll leave you this with my last thought, is that we can get together a package. Both governments can go back to their respective peoples and say, look, this makes sense. This clearly benefits you. Even if you're not literate in trade, you can see that this is benefiting you, and you can see that this is taking our respective countries to where they want to be as we head through the 21st century. Thanks.